I'm the 5-Minute Professor, and today's lesson is on George Washington, our first president, a tall, imposing figure, but he was only the tallest U.S. president until president number 3. Jefferson was just about as tall as he was, and by most accounts about a half an inch taller, but not as imposing of a figure. George Washington is the only president who did not spend any time in Washington, D.C. as president. He was president in Philadelphia and first New York. George Washington is the only president who was not a member of a political party. He in fact didn't think we should have political parties, but he may have been what we call, I'm going to go with naive, because it's not nice to call the father of your country stupid. But the English Parliament had had a two-party system for 300 years by the time we declared our independence. How could he possibly have imagined that there would not be a two-party system eventually? By the way, there's almost no proof anywhere that his father even owned cherry trees. Just thought you should know that. While president, George Washington helped to put down the Whiskey Rebellion. The U.S. government needed money, and they started a tax on spirits, which resulted in some farmers in western Pennsylvania throwing their arms up in the air and saying, "Hell no, government can't take our money!" And they sounded exactly like that, though, in Pennsylvania in the late 1700s. But in order to quell this rebellion, he raised a militia, and he was going to ride at the front of it and command the militia to put down this rebellion. He was talked out of that, and eventually Henry, call me Light Horse Harry Lee, put down the rebellion. And put it down. They just ran away as soon as the army got there. It wasn't really an army, it was militias. Remember Light Horse Harry Lee, though, because he comes up at the end of the story as well. George Washington never wanted to be a career politician. He didn't like being a general, he didn't like being away from home, and he didn't like being president of the United States. So he established a tradition of only serving 2 terms, and for that, the United States should be eternally grateful. There is a reason why I think George Washington might be our greatest president, and that is because he didn't want to be president. Ours was the first rebellion. Imagine if the man in command wanted to be in charge. He would have stayed forever. He would have been Fidel Castro. Here's something I didn't know, and maybe you didn't know either. George Washington did not like Thomas Jefferson, even though they were both Virginians. Thomas Jefferson had a tendency to be a little bit of a jerk. Some might even say a dick. He was really smart, and he wanted people to know he was really smart, and if you didn't agree with him, that meant that you weren't very smart. And when Alexander Hamilton came up with a plan to help raise money, and Thomas Jefferson didn't like it, he almost broke up the Washington administration. But before he could be fired, Jefferson quit. And George Washington never forgave Thomas Jefferson. George Washington died at the age of 67, which was relatively old around the turn of the 19th century, but he probably was healthy enough he could have lived for a much longer time. However, he went out riding and he got wet and cold in December of 1799, and he developed a cold. And at the time, and George Washington was a big believer in this, but the foremost medical minds thought the best way to get better when you were sick was to let the bad blood out. They let out about half of George Washington's blood volume. So he died from a bad cold, an upper respiratory infection, and doctors. When he died, Henry Light Horse Harry Lee gave the eulogy at his funeral, and it is the very first time that George Washington was described as first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. He never thought of himself that way. Perceptum, quispium, damnitium. Learn something, damn it. I'm the 5-Minute Professor, and thank you very much for listening to today's lesson. If you have any comments at all, please put them in the comments section down below. And of course, like it and subscribe to the channel. But most important, if you liked it, if you commented, and if you subscribed, tell your friends. Perceptum, quispium, damnitium. Learn something, damn it.